Hello, everybody. Welcome to Behavior Business Roundtable. We're on episode 3. I'm outside. Got a little different day, but it's like a 70-degree, slightly humid Indiana day, so I'm okay. We're enjoying it. If my chickens make an appearance, I apologize in advance. But we're gonna do this anyways, and I got some cool guests with me as always. Who wants to go first? I'm tired of calling on people.
All
You
I'll
guys
say
fight over
is
it.
we're just waiting to see the flies swarming. So we heard you're
It is a
attracting bugs at
little
this point.
It's a
So
little more flyy than I anticipated it is. Is that you saying hi to everybody, Steve?
sure. Hello, I am Dr. Steven Sparks. I am qualified to talk to you about these things because I own a few different companies: Sparks Behavioral Services, Homes Residential Care, technically Cooperant Learning, even though Kyle really does all the work on that. I just pay his salary. So he has to do everything I say and do here. So make me look good. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm glad that we disclosed that relationship at least.
We
All
have
right,
to.
my
Otherwise,
name. I can cut you off, then, Steve. My name's Taylor
Thank you.
Barker. I'm the owner and director of Ebb and Flow ABA in Flint, Michigan.
All right, and I'm Dr. Kristen Byra, and I am the CEO and founder of Upskill ABA. And so while I am a BCBAD, I have a slightly different role than the other two folks here because I do a software as a service, so a SaaS company, and also consulting.
Very, very good. Has everyone purchased their devil horns or similar stimuli on Amazon since Kristen challenged us?
I also have my magic wand today. Hopefully that
Oh,
makes an
wow.
appearance.
Nice.
I'm ready.
I don't know. This is too close to using emojis for me. You know, I revolt against all things like that.
It really is. It really is like using an emoji. Okay, we're gonna talk some dollars and cents today. Let's see where this goes. Let's touch on the Wall Street Journal article. This came out a while ago, highlighting the fact some folks were charging $800 an hour for services in ABA and autism care. $2.3 billion in 2023 were paid by states to providers. More recently, the New York Times article kind of highlighting some billing practices that could be overshadowing things like quality or even personal well-being. The first question, and maybe Taylor, you're a good one to start on this one. Are ABA services worth what they're charging?
Well, I think if you want to separate between kind of some of those outliers, right? And I'm gonna specifically
fair.
leave.
That's
I'm gonna
fair.
specifically leave the Florida Publix thing out of this, and maybe just talk about in that Wall Street Journal article that loophole that was in Indiana that was allowing some of those people to get $800 an hour, $1,000 an hour. That was a very weird oddity that had since been closed. So that is no longer happening. That wasn't, any longer going on, I think almost for a year now. And so it's kind of, the cat's already out of the bag, the barn door's already been shut, and like that's not going to happen anymore. And so I think separate from that, I would maybe reframe my answer or reframe the question and how I'm going to answer is saying, are services worth what we're being reimbursed? And I would say they're worth more. I think right now, when I look back at my history, my career, right when I started, reimbursement rates have essentially remained stagnant since about 2010. And so we're here 15 years later, and we're still getting paid about the same amounts. And I feel like that's really damaging because the overall quality of services are deteriorating. The amount we're able to pay providers is deteriorating. The margins that we have as business owners and as providers of these services are ultra razor thin. And we're starting to see some really, really big problems associated with that.
And you've mentioned that before, as far as especially with RBT salaries too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Steve, your vantage point slightly different, but what's your take?
Yeah. So there's different ways to look at it. I think if you are counting those, people that are just going through the motions, not necessarily helping people, then it's not worth the money. But again, let's see out the outliers. Let's talk about if everything was high quality, if we were all doing our job the right way, everything was working the way it should. Looking at reimbursement rates of between $60, $80 an hour, up to 40 hours billable per week. I did the math for this question. We're talking about $2,400 per week for a handful of years at max, the max cost, or around $120,000 per year-ish. So maybe $500,000 in total services over, a 5-year period, 6-year period, something like that. If you have someone who does not gain the skills to be independent in their lifetime, let's say on the more profound end of autism, they're having to live in either an adult foster care home or some sort of high intensity group home because of some behavior issues or not able to care for themselves. It's around $450 per day of care for that person. We're talking $3,000 a week, 150,000 ish a year. And if they go in at 18 and people on the profound side of the spectrum are living up to 50 years or more, we're talking at least 30 years, $4 million to $4.5 million over the lifetime. And so I agree with Taylor, just in a money and cents side of things. If we are working with those profound people, you say a BCBA making $80,000, $85,000 on average throughout their career, works for 40 years, they'll make around $3.5 million in their career. They could spend all their time helping one person with profound autism not have to be in a group home, and it would save the system money. Just entire career, one person. And so if you look at it from that lens of need to address the quality of care and address who we're helping, and it's not just, hey, we're forcing someone who doesn't want to be here because they got some quirky things through these services, but we're helping those who didn't learn to speak or care for themselves do those things, then I think it's quite obvious that in the long run, it certainly is worth the money.
Kristen, go ahead.
Yeah, Steve talked over his minute, but I did agree with his point, so I didn't interrupt him. So I do agree with what Steve is saying in terms of when we are doing our jobs as behavior analysts, then yes, absolutely. I had a client, goodness, this was right out of graduate school. She was around 18 months when she got diagnosed, level 3, no speech, all sorts of, severe behavioral deficits and things like that. Mom reached out to me about a month ago and she just got a driver's license and she is not an IEP anymore. And her teachers don't know that she ever had a diagnosis and like she's just thriving. Does our work actually produce the outcomes that we claim that it does? It can. I think what's unfortunate, like Taylor's already talked about and Steve has talked about as well, like not everyone's doing like that kind of care. And so are we being reimbursed enough? To Taylor's point, no, I don't think so. And we're actually doing the work we're supposed to. But I think there are a lot of bad actors and they're not doing their job. And I think they're overpaid when we are not doing what we have said that we're going to do.
This kind of leads into the next question a little bit, but do you think we're in a period of time, maybe it's obvious that we are, but we're in a period of time where those bad actors are, by one way or another, kind of being weeded out? Is that a good way of putting it? Are we trying that? Whether it's Medicaid or the state or new policies or whatever?
I think we need a dust crop for that kind of like level of, I don't think it's like one, like, I don't think we're looking out in a rose garden. There's like one little, weed. Like, I think there's a lot, unfortunately. I don't know if you guys saw it. It was a while ago on LinkedIn and it got kicked off pretty fast, but it's still on Instagram. It's Chadwick Remington. And so he or she did a whole bunch of spoof stuff about like, join ABA buzzword clinic today. And it has all of these different like, hey, how to bill through nap time because we're taking data on like respiratory rates and stuff. Like, as long as we've got data, we can bill and like all this stuff. A lot of satirical things, and I laugh about it because if I don't, I'll probably just cry and we're an ugly crier, and I'll save the audience from that. But I do think a lot of the pieces that person points at like really is happening in our. It's free daycare, like ABA insurance, like insurance funded daycare. Like, come on over to our clinic, where we just bill all day, no matter what the kid does. And I do unfortunately see more and more clinics behaving in that way, which that New York Times article, like I gave her 7. And that was related to how much sleep time so that we could still bill for the last 8. Because I don't know about you, if I've fallen asleep for 7 minutes, I know as soon as I'm awake, I'm on it and ready to engage in meaningful, activities for that next 8 minutes. So unfortunately, I don't think these stories that are popping up are these like little outliers that, it just was this one bad case of. I think unfortunately, like those are just the ones we've found and televised so far.
Yeah, in that story, they knew they were being watched, like they were there, like the news was just there with them. So yeah,
Yeah,
Taylor, go
I'll
ahead.
say after going ABAI with
Oh,
Kyle, if
Steve,
he
go
doesn't
ahead.
if he doesn't get his 7-minute nap in, he's gonna be quite cranky. So we got to
I
be.
did think of that. Steve got very, very accustomed to my nap schedule, where he was like, "Hey, you ready to go to eat?" And like, "Hey, it's gonna be an hour, man. I'm down. I've been talking to too many people. I'm done." But yeah, the idea of 7 minutes is ridiculous.
Yeah. Well, and so my last little follow up, and I think I've said this before, but we're at a level of pandemic with respect to autism prevalence. It's tripled in the last 10 years, maybe 10, 12, 15 years. And because of that, we can't say, oh, because this is now costing so much, we need to cut back. We should have actually tripled the amount of funding that's been going into this if we want to make any sort of headway, at least from a treatment end, right? And I don't want to get to a political discussion on this, but I think when I look at it and see, okay, all of these, legislators and people that are having to manage budgets for states and Medicaid systems, or even, Blue Cross Blue Shield, Anthem, they're essentially going to be needing to essentially have tripled the amount that they're spending on this, because that's where the prevalence has gone. And so I think it's unfortunate to say from that budgeting standpoint, oh no, the line item for ABA or autism services has stayed the same for the last 10, 12, 15 years when the prevalence rates tripled. So I think that's, again, I'll stop there. We're maybe now just going through the motions as a whole, and then there are more weeds in the garden because it's a lot harder to be a good provider. So just the ground may not be as fertile.
Yeah, and I've added that into some of my later comments, but we still have to look at the reinforcement too. Like we said last time, don't blame the rat. If there's a loophole, it's not against the law, and people can get more reinforcer, they're going to do it. And so,
yeah. And
we
while
need to
I definitely don't agree with it,
no,
but one of those companies that was listed in, I don't remember if it was the New York Times article or which article it was, the Wall Street Journal article, they had kind of as justification for what they had done said, we checked with the government. We checked with our auditors. We were audited, and we showed them what we were doing. And they said, yeah, it fits within the guidelines. So again, I don't agree with getting reimbursed $1,000 an hour for RBT services, but I think Steve is absolutely right on that following the reinforcement.
Well, we don't have to think it's right, and maybe they've ruined the reinforcement for everybody else, and it's shitty.
They ruined the reinforcement for everybody in Indiana.
Yeah, but at the same time, if that reinforcement's available, you're going to take it. It's just human nature. It's what we study. It's what we do. And so we need to try to actually develop a system that prevents issues like this and plans ahead for those potential issues, instead of like, oh, look what you did. You're a horrible person. You're out. You know what I mean? Like, no, there's no planning in any of this. They just kind of like dove head first. And we said, look what we can do.
Well, that's what Kyle, I think your original question was like, are these new policies kind of weeding out the bad actors? And like, I don't think so. I think it just punishes everybody. Like we're in this group, this group punishment contingency where, oh, like 2 kids like toilet papered the bathroom. So now everyone like loses the door to the stalls, like, because a couple of people messed it up for the rest of us. Like, yeah, it'll prevent those 2 kids maybe from doing that again, but it also punishes everyone else that could use the bathroom without destroying it. I think it's just kind of group punishment. And I think I said this before, I think the clients are the ones that pay the ultimate price on this.
Absolutely. And I think that's what those knee-jerk reactions in Indiana have done.
Mm-hmm.
Also completely unrelated, but just because you said it, is shocking just human behavior. How few people can go to the bathroom without destroying it, just when you go to a public bathroom. That is shocking to me.
All right.
We'll talk about those contingencies.
That topic over to Doc Analyzes Anything. Steve.
Yeah, we'll talk about those contingencies some other time, but
was very relevant. Very relevant. You actually made me lose my train of thought. I had a really good addition, but now I'm like,
good.
Well, I mean, yeah, let's move on to the next question then, because it does.
That was my point.
Up with that. Medicaid is making cuts, whether, this is bad actors doing it for everybody, or, political, or however you want to frame it. You've kind of answered this question. Is ABA being unfairly targeted, or are they asking legitimate questions when it comes to the amounts they reimburse and what they reimburse for? And maybe Steve, I'll start with you on that one.
Yeah, I'm going to say both. And we already talked about partially why there are legitimate reasons for being singled out. But again, we're following the reinforcement here. Anybody in the medical fields, at least in a larger company, when they're just looking at the bottom line and profit, are going to do the same thing. And so anytime there are loopholes, there are people taking advantage of it. Anytime there are, boards that have to answer to and no one's looking at the individual care, eh, um, this is happening. So I think it is maybe unfairly targeted because we are the new kids on the block. This is a lot shorter history of being paid for. And now we see a couple outliers, or we see the overall money going through the roof. It's much more salient compared to people that have been doing this type of, medical work for, 50 to 100 years or so, like a surgeon or something along those lines. And so I do think our behavior is more salient because we're new, and then you catch a couple of bad actors and it's unfairly put on us. But I'm sure it's rampant across the board with anybody that can find a loophole like that.
Kristen, I see your hand. Is this your 1 minute response or is this a
Yes.
rebuttal?
Well, yeah, that's a rebuttal.
Okay.
Can I do
Go for
both?
it.
Let's just do both. So
The time is
agree.
arbitrary anyways,
I agree with Steve that sure, like across all industries, right? I mean, there are like Botox is a real treatment for migraine management, right? Like you get Botox injections in your face and your neck, right? It's a real medical procedure, like real evidence based. But then there's people who are trying to just get Botox because they don't like the lines in their face, and they're finding providers who will like bill for that for migraine treatment. So there's people who abuse the system. I don't disagree with Steve, but I don't think it's um, the lack of how long we've been practicing. I think it's the sheer volume and the length of service, right? So if you go in for, heart surgery, like hopefully you're just doing that one time, right? This is not like something you're signing up for once a day, every day for the next 4 or 5 years of your life. Like even repeating services like physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech therapy, like those are like the volume that you engage with is, 1 or 2 times a week, 3 days a week, maybe, and for a much shorter amount of time. So I don't know. It's really the infancy of our field practicing as opposed to the sheer volume of repeatable services for a very long stretch of time. That is where folks are seeing how much of an impact on the budget that is.
Mm. Taylor, go ahead.
Yeah, I think they are unfairly targeting ABA, and I think it's to the points that Kristen and Steve just made. And without restating the same thing again, I think it ties into what I had just responded with before, just that the prevalence rate is at a point where it's a astronomical amount that we should be spending. And so they're saying, the people that are making the decisions related to the money are going, that number is ginormous compared to, like what Kristen said, compared to a 3-day-a-week occupational or physical therapy appointments. Absolutely not. We can't afford this. And I think to Steve's math point earlier, and then Kristen's point about those long-term outcomes, I think we can't afford not to do this. And so we're really in a catch-22. And so I do think we're the field, or ABA therapy in general, is being unfairly targeted, but I think it's from just a mathematics budgeting standpoint.
Yeah, Kristen, I see the hand.
So I agree with, I do want to spend just a hot minute about the long-term impacts, right? And like the risk of us not intervening, because they are really high, right? I don't have the stats off the top of my head, but I did not too long ago, just how much risk that someone with profound, or not even super profound, but if you need assistance in the bathroom, right? Your risk for sexual abuse just goes through the roof, right? Then you add in, if you don't have good communication skills, that just compounds, right? So even just getting someone continent independent in the bathroom would be really impactful for their trajectory over time, right? But I think the issue that I see is, this is what we're promising. I just don't think as a field we are doing a great job either reporting back to funders or being very transparent as an agency. This is what we've strived to achieve. These are the outcomes that we are getting. I on the website, we provide quality. We lead with blah, blah, blah. We care about, show me some data. Like, especially I am going to pick on PE only because they have so much data, right? Like, Taylor, how many kids are in your clinic-ish?
15.
Okay. So like, lovely. I love that for Taylor and those 15 kids, right? But that's a very small N size versus if I take one of the top PE companies where they have 200 clinicians times how, like,
Facts.
even if they only had 5, cases on average, like we're looking at thousands of kids in terms of we could be looking at aggregate data. And I don't see anyone sharing that. And why
Mm.
is that? We're not doing a very good job and we don't want to show that because I do think that is a disconnect. And I know, people can come cancel me. Get canceled here. I do think while I don't appreciate how funders are trying to solve this because I do think they're just making real blanket things that punish people who are doing the right thing. I do think that it really is the onus is on us as clinicians to say, hey, we're doing the things. We are making things better for this individual client, for their family. And by result of my treatment, you are going to save X number of dollars over this client's life, as Steve pointed out. I don't think we're doing that.
Well, I think part of that too, though, is you're going to have then the other half of people are like, yeah, well, I didn't get my college paid for, so you shouldn't get yours paid for either. I mean, there's going to be that whole other side of the argument where, oh, it doesn't matter. It's going to save future generations money. It's costing me money now. And so that'll be part of it. But I think it's a bad argument as long as both large companies and insurance providers are still able to pay their boards and their CEOs millions, if not billions of dollars over the lifetime of their contract. To get back to what you were saying about the time versus longevity of the services versus the newness of what we're doing, I think it's probably a combination of both though, because we promised the moon. Basically, we came in, we're like, hey, look, give us 40 hours a week for a couple years and we're gonna make everything great and then we'll be good to go. And it can happen oftentimes. There's gonna be some outliers. They'd probably be okay with a few outliers, but because we're not putting in the effort to the care, it's often taking much longer if they're reaching those goals at all compared to what they could be doing. And I'm just thinking about, that first little child I worked with when we knew each other when I was an undergrad, Kristen, like 3 or 4 months, and we went from nonverbal to like talking in short sentences. And that was a very tough case, yet we were able to make that success. We should be able to do that. Maybe not. I'd say the majority. And that was 3 or 4 months. You know what I mean? And it was preschool age, so they didn't need to be writing in full sentences or doing the rest. We just needed them, caught up to then rejoin the mainstream. And so I think our approach to this has damaged that as well, because we should be getting faster outcomes than we are. But it's also the model they've kind of set up for the rest of the medical community in general, where you don't put in the time and effort to help one person that much. It's you help the masses, try to see some improvement. It's a systematic issue as well.
Yeah. I mean,
There's
that's absolutely true. Sorry, Carol, I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
no, you go ahead. You go ahead.
I do think that has been really challenging for me as a clinician because I did used to practice and have caseload and everything, but I also ran my own business. And so I was okay with, I need to spend an extra hour with this client and I know it's not going to be, quote, billable. We didn't have CPT codes. It was state funded. We just got a certain stipend per month and like you decide how you want to use it. And so like as a business owner, I was okay like doing an hour or 2 or 3 pro bono because I wanted things to go very well for this particular client. And so I do feel for BCBAs who don't have that kind of flexibility to say, if I could just do a lit review, right? Like this problem is really tricky. If I could only, do a lit review, or if I could spend an hour or 2 with a mentor, but the mentor costs money, or like my company doesn't have someone and I have to get a BAA sign now. Like I get it. I do understand. I am empathizing with that. It's a very different framework that we were working. I mean, Steve, you're referencing back to graduate school, like that was all unpaid. So right? we were really, we were paying to provide the care. But I do think, we talked about not blaming the rat the other time, which I was guilty of. So thank you, Steve, for reminding me that.
I'm just going to keep reminding you over and over.
I love it. I can't wait. Maybe next time I'll have a rat costume when we come on. But we obviously were on very different contingencies. And so I feel for those clinicians who maybe also haven't had that moment where, you're saying, Steve, and like in our classroom, most of those kids are only there for like 15 hours a week. They were either morning kids or afternoon kids. It's a school system. We didn't have insurance.
Mhm.
Like there was a couple kids with a full day IEP, but it was few and far between. I am curious how many clinicians are like feeling the impact of their work, like in a really positive way, to be like, hey, I mean, obviously, it was 12 years later that I'm hearing back that she got her driver's license. But obviously, when I was in care with her, I mean, I saw immediate rapid change. She was very young. I was already working with her older sisters. We got her diagnosed like immediately. Parents are already completely bought into it. And like we saw phenomenal growth very, very early, that she went into kinder, without an IEP, without an aid. Like it was just a massive change in trajectory. I am curious how many BCBAs now coming through practicum and supervision graduate work are feeling that, to know what is possible and how that care should feel. Because I do think obviously money is never going to go away as a reinforcer, but I'm wondering how much of that kind of balance they get, seeing like the fruits of their labor being really positive. And I'm just not sure how often that's happening.
Yeah,
it could be contributing to burnout a lot too, because you don't have those other built-in reinforcers. It's just the money at that point, and there's a lot of ways to make money.
I wanted to back up real quick to one point that Kristen made, because I have a actually really relevant case example that happened just this morning, in saying that the large organizations or the people that have these great data sets or don't have them and should be taking them, needing to publish this and almost kind of create a call to arms to be able to show what we're doing, because I think it needs to happen on the aggregate. Because I will give you the example that happened today with an individual case where, so my company, we work with a young adult / older teenager. We work with them about 15 hours a week, and profoundly impacted, very severe symptoms, comorbidities, and a number of the goals that we have were related to, and we're targeting things that were also commingled with life skills and daily living skills. Things like Kristen was talking about, like bathrooming, being able to overcome. And it was written very specifically in the treatment plan. I've gotten very good at crafting those words to make sure that we're calling back to the diagnosable symptoms of autism: insistence on sameness, inflexibility, excessively circumscribed interest, and adherence to routines. That was what was specified in the treatment plan, that we are targeting excessively circumscribed interests and those routines in that specific location, and talking with and having a live peer review and describing, this is impacting this child, and this is the progress we've been making. They are almost there. I'm anticipating discharge and again, it's not short term, but in 6 to 12 months, right? This young adult will then be able to transition either into a group home and will be able to bathroom themselves. I even said this to the reviewer, I can see the light at the end of the tunnel. We've almost got it. And the response from the reviewer was, sorry, that's not a covered benefit because you're targeting a life skill. And that happened to me this morning from a major funder in the country. And so I think that is where we're needing to realign a lot of these, to go back to the very original question, Kyle, on, are we being targeted incorrectly, or are some of those things that the funders are providing legitimate? I think, to Kristen's point, we need to be aggregating those data and showing, like, look, this is what our outcomes are, and this is how we need to do it. And I think that's going to trump these one-off peer reviews that are just essentially utilization management.
We see the same thing consulting for severe behavior in the state, where someone's wandering out into traffic. Well, that's not a behavioral issue. That's just a safety skills issue. I'm like, well, it's still behavior, but nope, it's not a behavior. And everybody can see my air quotes here because of what they call behavior versus what we all know behavior is. Same sort of thing where it's like, how about we just help this person live life and cost you less money in the long run? How about that?
I think that goes back to like payer of last resort, right? Because if they're on a commercial policy right now under like their parent, then at some point they're going to transition right to probably like Medicaid. And so if a commercial funder is like, well, if I don't have to pay for it now, Medicaid can pay for, like, payer of last resort, right? I do think there is quite a bit of that.
Well, we're doing all Medicaid, so they're just passing the buck to themselves later. But
well, then they can go kick rocks with open-toed shoes. But
Well, and these questions are, I ask these kind of tongue in cheek because I know they're way more nuanced than what you can answer, you know, yes or no in 1 minute. And I appreciate all the insight. Was that Taylor? Was that specific instance because it wasn't like a behavior reduction target? It was like a skill building issue
I
that they
don't think
denied
it
it.
would have mattered. I think because the word bathroom was in the treatment plan goal, that
And
they
they're
went,
old.
bathroom is
Yeah.
bathroom is life skills, and that's not part of your coverage policy.
And they're older. You know that
Yes,
they're looking. You know
yes,
they're looking because they're older.
So to Kristen's point, I think it was last episode. Yep, that as soon as it was, I'm not going to name the specific age, but older teenager, it
Mhm.
immediately goes to peer review. Like
Yeah.
there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it.
Wow. Yeah, even I mean, I've been out of that world for a while, but even in my experience consulting with severe behavior, I'd get those kids that they graduated ABA, quote unquote. They graduated ABA, and I would be like, how? Like, what was your criteria for graduating? Like, we're still like doing the same things that were in these old behavior plans. Go ahead, Krista.
No, I want to talk about that term a little bit too, because I think there's also some misconception. I think that all of us kind of
For the audio people, I did use air quotes on that
okay.
term. Just
Graduated.
go
Yeah.
ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
I think that most people think that like ABA services are also like this like end of a rainbow and like, oh, and you're done. And like you're just never
Mhm.
gonna need it again and like never come back. Like think about if we compare it to other like behavioral health services and things like that. Someone who is suffering with anxiety or depression and goes and does therapy and is on medication, like they get really stable, right? And like we're great. And we maybe do a check-in every once in a while for meds, but like we can go years and not need to change dosage or anything else. But then like a life event happens, like your
Mhm.
best friend dies or like whatever, you lose your job and oh, you know what? I'm struggling. I need to come back. And so I do wish we as a field would also look at, applied behavior analysis services in a very similar light that, hey, you know what? We have taught a lot of the foundational skills to get them ready for like a less restrictive environment, like they're ready to go to school. But like, oh, now we are going through puberty. And guess what hormones do? They sometimes will change behavior. Or we need to work on Menses training or things like that, which they probably, I guess, won't cover because that's a life skill. But, to my point, if we're seeing a huge escalation in challenging behavior that has been stable for, months and months and months, but there was either some kind of, hormone issue or, issue that has happened in the environment, like I wish that folks would, you know, come around to the idea like that they may need to come back into services. I will say as clients get older, I think their options become a lot smaller, right? Of like who's gonna like Taylor to your point. I don't think most, if most folks are in the pediatric autism space, they're not gonna entertain the idea of doing part-time hours because it's hard to get staff, right? For just those after school hours. It's hard to then have a BCBA's caseload kind of in that area too. But I wish we as a field, both as clinicians and then also as funders, to understand that, like, yes, we said that we were good to discharge, but things occurred and we actually now need to come back to care. And I don't think we do that. It's usually like, you're done, bye, like, don't ever call me again. And then they go to
Yeah.
sleep, I guess.
Yeah, as I say, even the adults with the severe behavior issues, we will teach all the skills, reinforce them, get maintenance. We are not involved in any way, shape, or form. And then 5, 6, 7, 10 years later, we'll see them again because the natural contingencies were shaped somehow in the first place. If they're going back to the same situation where people react to target behavior the same way, then we are likely to see it back. We can't control the environment at all
Mhm.
times. And then to Kyle's point too, then we are sometimes just, all right, you didn't work on it earlier, so now we're working on the same toilet training procedure with a 40-year-old person and you could have done with a 15-year-old. And it's just as successful, but they've went all this time where they could have been much more independent.
Well, the New York Times article does a good job of kind of walking through the timeline, and it's like North Carolina specifically, but it talks about the growth, like how fast we grew, not as a science, but as a therapy model, like ABA therapy from 2010 or whatever it was until now. Like the clinic growth alone was exponential, and so you have to consider that quality dipped somewhere there because it's impossible to keep up with. There's so much money and there's so much to gain, like you said, from the service, essentially from the bad actors, or people who mean well but don't necessarily do it, the best way.
It's a little oversimplification because then there's some of us who like the science and see those as a secondary reinforcer, but
It's like you and 3 people, though, Steve.
that's true. Probably.
I don't think there's anything wrong with, it's a business. Like, I get it.
Mhm.
Like, just like doctors who are, I'm sure there's plenty of doctors who, like, when they were little, like, I want to help people, right? Like the kid who scrapes his knee and they're running over with the napkin, right? To save them, right? I'm sure there's doctors who start off with the same intentions of really wanting to help and do well, but they still, like, you have to obviously make a living, right? Like, I do a lot of pro bono work, but like I still also have 2 kids I need to put through college. So I don't think there's anything wrong to say that, like, hey, I want to provide services to this population and also be able to, not be living in debt. Like, I don't think there's anything wrong to say that. But I think to your point, Kyle, I do think there's some folks, especially those who are not coming in as clinicians, and they're just like, oh, well, everyone else is doing it. Like, this is like running a car wash. No, like, it's not a laundromat or a fast food franchise that you can just unbox it and it just magically functions like McDonald's. I do think there are folks who are coming in that realm, and it's really
I mean, we talked about it last week. If that is your experience through your practicum, then that's all you know. But the contingencies are still too strong to overcome for a lot of people that go through situations and want to do all the right things as well. And so it is a systematic issue that we need to try to change and shape rather than it being, again, blame the rat in those situations.
Yeah. Have we hit on that point enough? Should we move on?
Yeah,
Yes,
I'm excited for the next
please.
question because I've got a maybe really candid answer for you.
Okay. Well, should we start with you? Should we break protocol and start with you on this one?
Sure, yeah, we can do that.
Let's do it. We can write the rules as we go around. Reimbursement revenue. As a business owner, what would you cut tomorrow if your reimbursement rates dropped 20%?
I would close, and I did, and I had a clinic in Indianapolis, and not entirely because of these cuts and these adjustments, but the caps on hours, the caps on the number of years of service, the additional changes that were coming down because of what was identified in the Wall Street Journal article. We were at the time already operating at a loss, but had kind of long-term projections for financial solvency. And hearing about those things happening and knowing that those things were coming, we actually closed. And so I think we are at a point right now where doing things well are at such razor thin margins that there is no way. There is nothing left to cut if reimbursement rates were to drop.
Kristen, follow up?
Yeah, I mean, I think what Taylor's describing, like, we saw happen not too long ago, like in Colorado, right? Like, where people were like leaving in droves, and then now they've changed the rates, so now people are like flocking back there, right? And so I think we will continue to see that kind of like run in, run out when those changes happen at that kind of significant change.
Steve.
Yeah, I'd say from our perspective with the consulting we do, and because there aren't a lot of people doing what we do, my answer was close, but not the same as I just canceled those contracts that tried to pull that with us and go to those that are still willing to pay for us.
Well, because that's different too. You not to interrupt your minute, but you have like kind of a diversification of contracts as opposed to like I work with these payers.
Yeah, we work with the Community Mental Health Agency, which then bills Medicaid for our services. And so we negotiate each contract individually. We try to tell them, no, this is what we're doing across the board. And it's very much a take it or leave it type of scenario, whereas others aren't going to have the ability to do that because there's competition, or kind of have this general payer that's like, we don't care if you have these services or not, really. We just care about the bottom line. But that doesn't count towards my minute. So what I was going to add to that, though, is I think there's a much different view of a small independent clinic owner versus these large companies, that if you're making 5 or 10% returns and then there's a drop, then you're screwed. You no longer have the ability to make money and live. You can't do anything but keep going. Whereas if this is just part of your portfolio diversification, 5 or 10% returns is probably enough to make it make sense to not shut things down and just open up 3 more, buy 3 more clinics. And now you're making your 30 or 40%, or what would be equivalent to your 30 or 40%. And so there is a point where the reinforcer is not going to be worth the aversive conditions and the competing contingencies. It's punishing trying to run a company. It's aversive jumping through all these hoops. It's tiring. And if that's why I would say I'm not working with them anymore, is it's not worth my time and effort and frustration if I can't make a good living out of it as well. And so nobody's going to school with a bachelor's to barely make it by. Nobody's spending all this time and effort to run a company to barely make any money. And that's what it's going to come down to. And hopefully we can shape some of this so it's not punishing the little guy anymore, but these other bad actors who are just trying to make this 5, 10, 20%, but on a mass scale.
And that's a good point. As a bigger company, you can absorb some of those fluctuations and things like that. I feel like we should have somebody representing these bigger companies on this, because I know that we're not intentionally picking on big companies either. There's some good ethical, sound practices all over. But any follow up to any or rebuttals or disagreements?
I mean, I will say that there are.
Are you following up your own?
Steve's following up his own follow up. Yeah,
I'm rebutting myself.
He does this. Yeah.
This. No, I do think we need to be careful, because there's nothing wrong with size as long as you have the systems in place to not have everything else go out the window.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
I think we just tend to pick on size because we think of the large ones as having the most issues more than anything.
Well, and to that exponential growth, I'm seeing, I mean, I get the news, I get the, targeted ads and whatever. There's new clinics popping up all the time and everywhere. And like, hey, we just started, but we have 10 locations across the state. I'm like, how did that happen? Like, there's no pictures of any of their clinicians on the website. There's no address for where these clinics are. They just started, and so there is a question of, like we've been harping on, but there's a question of quality when it comes to fast growth where there appears to be money as the primary reinforcer. Well, but maybe that's just my hippie upbringing. I don't know.
No, I'll paint the picture, because if you have an investor can do larger, more at once, and still have the quality of care controls in place, then that is going to be much more sustainable than trying to do one and then make enough money to grow from there. That's much harder to do. They always say the best way to make $1 million is to have $1 million. You have that money to invest and you can grow from there. But to paint it from, we'll say, some of the group home companies that we've worked with, 1 or 2 locations, and everybody's doing the right things, working really well. There's a huge need in the state of Michigan for housing people. Now you're up to like 20, 30 places, and now you have to keep people around that are sometimes abusive, neglectful, just to have the staff there at all. And your quality just goes out the window. And now you're the person who warehouses people rather than actually provides care. And so if you can do it and you know how to plan it, there's nothing wrong with that. Setting it up and growing and opening 10 locations if you have the money to do so. But it often does not go well because you can't maintain the quality of care.
Yeah, it's not just the money. I think it's the oversight, right?
Right.
I have the quality survey, right? It's free, right? People can go in there and do a self-assessment. And so I will see folks with the same email tag, right? Like from, ABA is awesome or us, right? And, their scores are very, very different. And I'll see it's like one's from this state and one's from another state. So I do think that, yeah, like it is easier to run a business if you have lots of money to pour into it. But I don't think that folks are pouring it into that area necessarily. They're just hiring a bunch of people that, I've been approached and consulted by companies like this. I'm like, where are you operating? They're like, oh, this state. And I know because it's the Medicaid reimbursement rate why you have picked like which of these areas that you have gone into, right? Arizona is up there and Utah, right? And Colorado. And I'm like, cool. So like who's overseeing all of this? And the response was like, well, they're master's level clinicians. They oversee themselves. And I'm like, cool. It's been really nice talking to you. Like, go have a nice life, right? Because this is not something that I'd like to get involved in. So I do think, to Kyle's point, when I start seeing just brand new places popping up, the About Us is just some cookie cutter ABA buzzword ChatGPT write up, and I have no idea who works there. Like I get very skeptical about someone's really planned this out to expand to meet a need versus I'm just expanding so I can hire a bunch of people and start billing for kids.
I should have saved it. I saw one that even said on the About Us, this would be a good spot to include, and then it was like, oh, that was ChatGPT, clearly
Yeah.
ChatGPT.
The money piece comes in where if you don't have the funds and you try growing and then you're going to shut down because the money's not coming in fast enough, not that the money actually plays a role in the quality of anything necessarily.
Hey, let's get to our next question. Let's talk spending. What do owners overspend on, and what are they underspending on? And Taylor, I just feel like this is your wheelhouse. Let's go to you first again.
No, absolutely. I think they're overspending on staff turnover. So I'm going to kind of rephrase your question on, the expendables or the things that we're actually paying for. But I think inadvertently through their organizational structure and their operational structure, and it ties into what we've been talking about all these episodes with quality and things like that. But I think we're overspending on things like staff turnover. And then I think underspending due to our operational organizational designs, we're underspending on staff work-life balance, and we're underspending on the idea or the ability to let our clinic be led by medical necessity. And so things like, hey, I have a client who's willing to stay an extra half hour, so I'll just stay open an extra half hour. You're looking at it, I think it's too short term, or it's too nearsighted to say, okay, well, yeah, sure, we can stay open another half hour. I think I was hired a number of years ago, I won't name the company, but to start an ABA company for an individual that had run a home healthcare system. And I had said, like, from the outset, we are going to be open 8 hours, right? Because we need to make sure that we're having staff that are only working 40 hours a week, that we're not having these big gaps, that we're not having, because that's going to lead to quality outcomes, staff retention rates. And the very first client that we had that said, sorry, I can't make those hours work, but I could make these later hours work. We opened up, we were open 13 hours a day. And so I think when we're looking at these things, I think we need to be spending our money on letting medical necessity, clinical appropriateness, and then the staff retention play things that come into play. Spend the money on that. So that's I think I went over my minute. So
no, you're good.
I think Kristen said,
yeah,
I could borrow some of her time.
She borrowed time, but investing more into staff retention essentially would take care of a lot of that stuff. Yeah, Kristen, go ahead.
And yes, Taylor can have some of my time. I would say that I agree, we're spending way too much on turnover, but I don't think companies, when they're saying that they're targeting that, like, are spending that on real things either. Pizza parties, or like ice cream, the food truck shows up, or there's a swag bag, versus actually these are systems that you could be investing in that are going to keep your staff engaged. But when I do consulting for clinics and I start asking, like, well, what KPIs are you tracking? It is 99.9% strict operations. So there's no clinical KPIs that they're looking at, like, long term. And then what are you doing to adjudicate the fact that you have a bananas amount of, client or staff cancellations? Like, what are you doing to look at how many different RBTs have worked with this one client over the last quarter when that is in the double digits? Like, what are we doing about that, folks? And it's like, oh, well, but Friday we're doing X throwing as a company that's going to be amazing, and it's going to make everyone want to come back Monday morning.
Yeah, and I think maybe my example, and so I'm going to rebuttal before Stephen gets a chance to speak, is
he rebutted himself earlier. So
okay, so I think to Kristen's point on saying we're not buying the pizza parties and the axe throwing, I think organizationally and operationally, that's where that spend has to occur. And to say, I'm only going to require my BCBAs to bill 25 hours a week as opposed to 28, 30, 32. I think I just saw a post today that someone was required to do 35 hours a week as a W-2 employee. It was like, that's how you're going to lose BCBAs. That's how you're going to lose RBTs, right? And so I think having that spend, in the sense that you're losing out or you're missing out on 5 to 10 hours a week of BCBA billable time, that's going to increase your quality. That's going to increase your staff retention. And that is a spend.
Yeah, I think we have to be careful not just thinking in terms of throw more money at people too, because whatever you pay someone then becomes the norm for them. And then in the future, you're like, oh, don't ask me to do more. Like, this is just my base pay. You know what I mean? Bonuses become normal pay if you're not careful and make it contingent on certain things and make it clear that that's what we're doing, that because this metric is very important to us. So we're giving you more for meeting that metric, that sort of thing too. But generally, yes, quality of life will save you a lot of money on turnover because it is very expensive having to hire and advertise for hiring all the time. Um, and the only other thing I'd add to this at all was something along the lines of like technology. You know, it could be an overspend or an underspend depending on how it's used. If you're talking about it is cheaper for me to use this technology than hiring 3 more administrative people, and then that you would need to do that amount of work, then that is a good use as long as it's doing the things you really need it to do and you're checking in and making sure it's not just, now I have to pay someone to go through all the notes after we've used this technology. But if we talked to one company, it's going to be $7,000 per year for a BCBA to use their computerized system. It's going to cost us over $100,000, or we can hire one human for less than that to do all that work, and it makes much more sense there. So I think people sometimes just aren't looking at the cost versus benefit of a lot of these things as well.
Mhm.
For
Yeah,
Bo,
Kristen.
for Steve. So someone in tech, for in the tech space for ABA companies. I also think that companies just look so, to quote Taylor, like they're just so short-sighted of like, oh, but if I use this today, it's going to save me $200 like by next week, as opposed to like if you actually are fixing from a system standpoint, this is going to help attack like staff turnover. It's going to increase quality outcomes. Like, yeah, I can't put a dollar amount on a kid graduating therapy 6 months ahead of the trajectory, right? Or like you actually getting your authorizations approved because you're actually making good clinical decisions. It's harder to do that point A to point B like ROI when you're looking at quality. And so I think a lot of products out there are trying to like, oh, well, we're going to reduce the amount of clawbacks from Medicaid, like, which, yeah, that's great. I'm sure no one wants clawbacks from TRICARE or Medicaid, but when you're only looking at those short ROIs, like you're still, I think, not looking at the full issue.
Last question, guys. Workforce and quality. There's a lot of issues, a lot of things to fix. Which of these matters most? And again, I ask these tongue in cheek. I know there's not a great yes or no answer to all these. Which matters most? Things like fixing reimbursement, client outcomes, BCBA burnout, RBT turnover. Steve, I'll start with you.
I will give you the definitive answer that you're afraid to ask for. No. Um, I'd say, I mean, obviously everything matters, but I'd say the two that to me that seem to matter the most are the BCBA burnout. Because if you don't have people doing the work, if they're going to go find a job elsewhere, then there is no company, there's no system left whatsoever. And then also the client outcomes, but more so the quality of care. And like I said earlier, we made a lot of promises because we were seeing success and really quite confident in our ability to help people broadly to a larger system. And then now not everybody's hitting that mark, or a lot of people are just doing what they need to do to get by because they have too much work or all these other demands, or sometimes just the hoops you go through or jump through just to get your work done at all, based on both the system and where you work. And so if we were to go back, be more successful, get the client outcomes for the majority of people, they're showing that they've been willing to pay for these things and even maybe pay more. But they're not going to do that if we can't actually help people and show them what can actually be done using our science rather than it just being a money making scheme. And so we need to put our money where our mouth is, so to speak, and really show them what can be done. Otherwise, there's no reason for them to pay more or keep paying what they're paying.
Kristen.
I think if we fix quality, everything else will fall under that. So if we improve our quality, then we should see an improvement in outcomes. We have better outcomes, and BCBAs are feeling less burnout because they're contacting those contingencies of reinforcement other than just payment, right? We also know that RBTs tend to leave when they feel like their work is not impactful. So I'd hope that RBTs, also are finding value in their positions. And if we can prove better outcomes, then I think we can finally move into value-based pricing with funders to say, we're doing great, so you should pay me more. But I think I think you have to start at the top. I think if you start at quality, everything underneath it will improve.
Taylor, bring us home.
It's the money episode, and so I'm saying it's the money, it's the reimbursement. So I'm gonna disagree with Kristen and say I think the money has to come first. I think it's a unrealistic.
You think we're gonna do a better job if I'm getting paid $200 an hour instead of $100?
I'm saying that it's a pipe dream to think that we're gonna create these great models and then everything else is gonna be responsive to it, or these great outcomes, and then everything will be responsive in kind. I think if, like we were saying, to use your reference of the rose bush or the rose garden versus the weeds in the garden, I think the more fertile you can make the soil, yes, you will still have the bad actors. You will still have the people that are raking in the money and only giving it to the CEOs. But I think it will at least allow for, and we'll start to see a greater proliferation of good quality providers who are willing to then make those choices and set up those organizational systems and processes that then allow for better quality, better BCBA retention and RBT retention rates, the ability to have the types of systems where caseloads are tiny and where then we see better outcomes. So I think it's a money first thing rather than a quality first.
But if we just sprinkle the money, is it not going to just isn't that just like playing the little flute for more people to come bad actor and be like, cool, there's even more money to be made?
Did you do any looking into those people that were charging $900 per unit? Were they doing much better, higher quality of care than those that were making less? Because
no, I'm saying I'm saying that was an inherently bad actor. I'm saying if you would have given me $600 an hour, I would have been able to create a therapeutic environment that would have created better staff retention, better client
outcomes. But these people who are billing or requiring 35 hours a week, aren't they just going to be like, awesome, instead of getting paid, reimbursed $3,500, now we're going to double that.
Right. Yes. But Kristen, what I'm saying though, is that it's going to allow the types of providers on this call to then be able to create those things. And I think, again, and this is my own pipe dream, right? I called
three of us.
Shut up, Steve. I'm going to finish. So I called your thing a pipe dream. So this is my pipe dream. But I do see where we've got a situation where yes, you're going to still have those people that say, yep, I'm going to now get 70 instead of 35. But I think it's then going to allow for a greater degree of people to create businesses, to create their own therapeutic practices. And again, in a vacuum, in a perfect world, I think eventually those things will weed each other out, and you'll start to see more of the good guys and less of the bad guys, because then the clinicians that are saying, well, that company's making the same as this company, but they're making me work 35 billable hours versus this one who's going to give me 25, or we're able to publish our results and go, look, hey, Taylor's clinic is showing a 85% success rate, and the one I'm at's only showing 35. Yeah, I'm going to go to Taylor's clinic. And I think if we had a bunch of Taylor, Kristen, and Steve clinics, then it'll eventually, again, this is my pipe dream, this is in my vacuum, we will then see those ones disappear for the most part, and the overall quality metrics are gonna increase.
So I'm gonna, because you called out the doc analyzes anything earlier, I'm gonna tell everyone that wants to hear this argument in full, go listen to the good versus evil episode.
Okay. Well, and I missed that one, Steve, so I'd be interested. Yeah.
Scientifically, there is no such thing as good versus evil. There's no good, there's no bad. There are just reinforcers and punishers. If you have a reinforcer compared to another reinforcer, one gets you more money than the other, most people are going to go towards that if there are not other contingencies involved. And we've already talked about many of the BCBAs out there didn't go through a system where all these other reinforcers have been established and are almost as powerful or more powerful than just the money bottom line. And so you have to have a system in place where there is a contingency that controls the amount of money based on the quality, like Kristen was saying. And we can say, no, we should be getting more. Otherwise, everybody's just going to go after the reinforcement regardless, because no one's thinking in terms of good and bad. They're just thinking about, I'm going to get paid either way, I might as well get paid more. And so cultural selection would tell us that the culture is going to select those services that provide the better outcomes and reward them better because of that. And so I think we need to show that those outcomes are possible, and then let them select out the companies that don't provide those before they're going to be willing to reinforce it.
Yeah. And I think we're saying the same thing. And I think I'm not disagreeing with either of you. I'm saying I think or not the industry, the field needs the money first, I don't think it will follow in kind to increases in quality or increases in BCBA staff retention.
I agree more money is necessary, but I don't think more money will fix the issue. The contingencies have to fix the issue, and that might be what we need to get to the money.
Right. Like, because you pointed out, Taylor, an important piece. So, like, yes, if I'm getting paid, I'm just going to use easy math because math is hard. So instead of getting, as a BCBA, instead of getting $100 an hour and I'm getting 200, that will allow me to have a caseload of, 6 kids instead of like my current 12. Like, absolutely. But like, that's you as like a sole business owner, like recognizing that because you have a values alignment with outcomes and quality, right? I'm assuming your values. Sorry, we're going to put values in your mouth. But unless there is some kind of contingency with the funder to say, hey, we're willing to reimburse you this rate if this is how you manage, this is like the cap on the cake. Like, unless there's some parameters, I don't think other agencies are going to follow suit with that. But I also know that if a funder tries to dictate care, then we start having issues with medical parity, right? In terms of them dictating how many kids we're allowed to see and stuff like that. So I agree with the doc over there. As much as I begrudgingly have to say that, I just don't. I don't think the reining of the money is gonna solve. I think even for smaller clinics, it will be challenging to say, like, yes, now that we're gonna make the same amount of money for you doing less, like we're going to focus on that because, like, we have been kind of eyeing this, new system or this expansion of the building. If we could actually keep that caseload at 10, like it's still a reduction from 12, but not where we really want it to be, like we could afford. Like, I think those competing contingencies are still going to be really strong unless there's some parameters about how your like model of care would need to change to access that higher rate. I think we're still going to be in the same shit show we're in now, just with spending more on it.
Yeah. And I could see that happening 100% too. I think that's my pipe dream and I'm sticking to it.
Maybe we should do it.
Sprinkling some spice and walking away.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe we should just.
Taylor's going to live in his dream world. The rest of us in reality will have to agree that just more money, more problems, Taylor, right?
Yeah.
No, I know. And I think, the last 100 years definitely demonstrates that. Just throwing doesn't necessarily work.
Maybe we should look at the broader one of these episodes. It's not just about our field, but other areas of work too. Like, work your way up from in the jungle, the meat packing plants, and the need to develop, unions and unionization to combat some of this treatment. And now pay for work is like, or pay for performance is frowned upon because of those models where everybody would be doing better if you just got your work done, got home and got paid for it rather than sitting there for 8 hours pushing the button that you could have pushed in 4. And so maybe that's something we can do later, because that is, I think, part of the argument here as well, is reinforcer values and where they lie, because they all are just reinforcers at that point.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll cut it off there because we are a little over time. But I like the ending there. It's kind of like that little chocolate part at the bottom of the ice cream cone. Is a fun ending.
I always like when I'm told to shut up. So
all good, Steve.
I just hope all teams had fun. Hey, I had fun. Thank you 3 for joining us. Thank you for listening. If you made it this far, thanks for joining Cooperant Learning's Behavior Business Roundtable number 3.